Hi, welcome PlayBASIC coders. Here we are with another conversation about another different library. Oh, isn't that terrible? This one's about this layers GUI concept. Making interfaces in GUIs is something that comes up on a regular basis, and we have a number of solutions that are some are quite mature, but they're all sort of they're either custom solutions and they're baked a certain way. Whereas what I want to do is give you a way that you can build GUIs out of a sort of standard framework, but you do the rendering. That means you can make it look the way you want to. So at the moment, the rendering is done with a really simple set of routines. Here, we'll have a look at the example, and it's not very exciting, but we'll talk about it in a second. Wow, underwhelmed? You should be. So what we have here is this concept of layers. Now, different layers can be different classifications of things we want on screen. Here we have three different classifications. We have a screen, which is this background thing, which I can click on. If you look at the bottom, you'll see it's saying hovering over layer 0, which is the screen layer, the background layer. Over the title bar, we get layer 13 over these weird rectangles here, which are sort of placeholders for images or windows. We're getting different layers. So it's working out what layers if we clicked, that we are interacting with. So if we up here to the menu, we're on layer 13. If I click here, we open up the background part. That's what we want. I've got a sort of mock-up file here as well, and sort of click on the options there. The menus are pretty basic, and as I said before, the rendering itself is done in your render code, in your render loop itself. At the moment, the menu is considered to be one layer. You can think of this concept really as like layers within your average paint program. So the screen is the base layer. Each rectangle has its own separate layer, which can be independent of each other. And the menu is sitting on top of those things. So when we look down from the top like this, we're seeing the top-down view. Now, what I want to do is make sure these things are disconnected from each other. So I'm using the call function to dynamically call things. And so just to show the menu actually works, I can click load, and we get a load dialog. Amazing. Let's have a look at it. So the main loop in this application is this. We set our frame rate. We've included the layers library. We've opened up a screen, which is the background layer, which is the blue sort of thing. We'll have a look at the code in a second. We'll create 11 of these rectangles and our menu. And the render loop is this. That's it. The entire program. We don't do any of the rendering. We don't do any of this inner loop stuff at all. The whole point of this is that we call a GUI, it refreshes our input state, calls the functions it needs to, and we just kind of keep it going in a loop until the program ends. We'll probably have some sort of function to go, hey, is it quit time? So you sit in a repeat until or while, whatever you feel like, until the GUI sync returns false, meaning the program's ended. So stop. I haven't implemented that at the moment, so this is what we have. Now, when we create a new layer, this thing over here, we're giving a screen as a string. We don't have a function called new screen layer, any of that kind of stuff. If I go and have a look at this code inside the layers library over here, which is it's a bit convoluted at the moment. I'm still not sure about how to best present this stuff to people. So we've got some stuff here that's used, some stuff here that's not used. So there's a bunch of structures in here mostly. Each layer has certain characteristics about it, like its name, obviously. There'll also be things like ID, so you can ask the layer system to find a particular thing by name, as in a string name, and then do something to it, send some data to it, or call a function of that. That'll be a bit more complicated, but I think that's doable. Yeah. Anyway, so I'll press on. This create new layer function, it's down here. It's GUI new layer. We pass it our name, and if we have a look at it, what's doing is it's going. Internally, it has a list of these. Has an array of these objects, calling them objects. So when we add one to it, we're going, give me a free slot in this objects array. Then we at least initialize that thing there. We run through, and we say its current name. It's the name of itself, its own string name, for what kind of type of layer it actually is. And then we do something weird. These are the actions that are potentially available for this layer. Now we're using function index, the name of this layer. So we pass in screen, it's going to look for a function called screen_create. If that exists, it will return an index of create. So we've got a create function, potentially a delete function, update, random. Now, if we do it like this, it means we don't have any hard-coded calls inside the GUI to our different types of layers. As long as our layer has a certain, our layer has function names that are of the same type, or the same format, I should say, and accept the right parameters, we're golden. The parameter stuff's a bit complicated at the moment, so we'll probably change that at the moment. So for the time being, we have 8 different possible functions that each layer can have. The last 2 are not even used at the moment. I've got create, delete, update, and render. So create is when I called new function back here. It calls this new function, falls through here, finds the location of these functions within the program. We get down to the bottom here. Now, if this function index exists, we actually call this function right then. Now, if this was screen, let's go across to the screen layer library. It's going to call this bit of code here. At the moment, this is empty. It doesn't do anything. It could do something, but it doesn't. Now, let's say we're talking about the rendering loop. Go back to here when we call a GUI sync. If we find that declaration, it's pretty much the same process. We're getting our array of objects. We're refreshing our input from the user. So we're going, what's the mouse doing? Is the buttons pressed? Have they been clicked since last frame? All that kind of good stuff. Then we're going, well, what are you hovering over? This is not used yet. And once we found something that you're hovering over, then we go, okay, you're on top of this particular layer, and then we can go call these input events for this particular layer. So if we clicked on something and that layer has certain events, if we go back across the rectangle one here, this one has a mouse over, which means we can detect if the mouse is over this particular type. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to. It's getting a bit complicated there, I guess. But the whole point here is that this system doesn't have calls to your functions directly. It calls them indirectly through call function, and that means that we could have drop in different types of elements. Unlike other GUIs that I've written in the past, where there's just one giant blob of code and you just drag the entire blob of code in and it either does what you want or it doesn't. The goal of this is trying to make it more flexible, so we can we can add different layer types and have it call the different layer types and manage the different layers for us, and it's going to manage the state for us. So it handles the draw order stuff for us, handles what the mouse is currently over. If I type something on the keyboard, if we have focus, we can get that data sent to the right thing that needs the text being sent to it, for example. Like we might have I'm not quite sure about how we're going to implement these at the moment, but there might be a key down or a key hit kind of this behavior here. You'll notice that the rectangle one here doesn't need all of the different types of render types. So we have a mouse over, but we have no mouse clicked, because way back in here, sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit too much, I guess. When we created this thing, let's go back to it. See how we have four sort of main possible events, we'll call them. A creation event, a deletion event, an update, which is, if this object was moving around the screen, we'd have to provide an update function for it that would be called before the renderings happened. So we run through and call, for each layer, we call the update function for that layer. And maybe we could have something that would tell the order of this happening. We'll probably just leave it in the draw order. So we update the layer if it has an update function, and then we call the render function if it has an update. Sorry, if it has a render function. You don't need a render function. So if we, for example, if I renamed, where are we here? If I just put a name at the side, rename render 2, now the rectangles will no longer be renderable. We won't get any sort of weird errors because it's still, the rectangle layer still exists, but they have no, when it comes time to render those parts of the scene, that function doesn't exist for it. So it just goes, oh, well, the rectangle exists in as a layer, but it's hoverable. See, I'm still over the rectangles. If you look down the bottom, and if I could click and interact with it, I could do those things, but it doesn't actually do anything else. There's no rendering of it, because when it comes time for the GUI to render this thing, the function doesn't exist. Now, having simple rectangles or whatever, it's all very novel. Imagine the rectangles here with images, and those images you could treat like they're windows. If we swap across to, I loaded this example before as a contrast to give you an idea. This is one of the Flex examples. Go to the top of it. This is Flex 9 gadgets. Alright, so this is a good 10 years old yet again. I mean, Flex was written sometime in 2007 or something. Where it was. If I run this example, we'll get a bit of a clear idea of it's prettier. We can do things like we can grab our image, scroll it around, we can resize the image here. Are these ones resizable? No, it might not be. I can make it larger, and you can put it down the taskbar in the bottom there. Here they're all drawn as transparent. Got some scroll bars here to change the sizes of these things, which I think is just the default behavior of this window. So that's all fine. You can delete the windows if you want to delete them. So they're pushing to front and all that kind of stuff. That one there's not in front, so I can't select it. It's hard to tell when they're transparent. No, there's no resize. Right, so it's very pretty. Just hit quit for that. But I give you a look at the inner complexity of this thing, right? So we pull in the library into our project. We load the media that we're going to be using, which is the images that are in the window. We define our own window type to handle what windows we're creating in Flex. creating a taskbar, which is the thing at the bottom, setting up our array, running through and randomly creating each window, giving it a title, giving it a position, allowing it to, yeah, there you go. They're not allowed to resize in this one here. Setting its alpha level, just for, giggles, really. Flex view top point. What's the left-hand corner of the viewpoint? Oh, okay. So here we're asking it whereabouts in the flex window is the top left-hand visible part of the window that isn't the title bar or that kind of stuff, For each window, we're creating a scroll handle, which is a vertical scroll handle, creating a horizontal one, creating a surface, attaching the surface to the image, opening the window, storing it here. Yeah. That just creates the window. Then our main loop, which is down here, we have to call the event processing stuff and then process events manually. Now, if you've never done any sort of GUI programming before in your life, you might not be aware that this is how GUIs normally work. You have a big, your code sits in an event loop, and then you sort out what events work. Often the GUI system tries to hide this away from you, and it'll process the stuff itself, and it just calls these user functions itself, which at the time this was written, we couldn't do that in PlayBASIC. We probably could do something like that today, which is what this new this layers concept is trying to actually utilize. There's a lot of code there, and like here when we click on a window, get the parent object, the window, run through and get the thing here to redraw it and stuff, and a lot. And this is the code that drives that example at 300 lines long. If you look at the FlexiGUI, I don't know how long this thing is, but it's quite large. Yeah. If you look at the function view itself, you've got a lot of different functions in there to do very specific things with each different type. So there's functions that for doing things with a window, functions doing things with gadgets, all kinds of stuff. And it's very rigid. And display-wise, you can't really change the styling. You can't really do anything of that yourself. There's no menu system. You can't attach menus to things. You can't have... It's a lot of things that, it's good for some stuff, but not others. That's my point. And the downside is a giant blob of code you have to pull into your application. You're kind of stuck. You have to pull it all in, even if you only want to do one simple thing. Have a window you can click, or have two windows you can click on, or something like that. That's what we want to get away from. Am I suggesting that layers is going to be, a replacement for that? At the moment, no, it's not. If we can solve some of these logical problems and make them sort of easy to understand for people, then yeah, maybe it will be. In theory, you could just include your own menu layer, as long as it has these a create function, render and destroy, those kind of functions. So you maintain how you interact with the menu. So you work out when the mouse is over the menu. Just down here somewhere. This is there you go. So the mouse over is really just running through each item in the menu and going, are we over this box? Because it's already been worked out where this is on screen. If the menu clicked function is called, we're running through, looking for the thing we're hovering over, we're setting it to clicked, which I don't think we'll really even need. Checking if it's a sub menu. If not, we just call the function. We're using the same behavior here. So our menu behaviors, which are up here in text, this is another thing I want to work towards as well, is have simpler ways of declaring menus and that kind of thing, so we don't have to do this kind of stuff at the bottom. Is it still in the bottom here? Yeah. Here's an example of one of the menus I wrote for one of the tools. So we've got to make the menu by calling a bunch of functions. Which works, but it's equally as ugly. What have we got there? This must be for the block conversion tool. There it is. Picked a map it is. So these are the name of this menu item. This is the parentage of this thing here. That's the on-screen thing. Picked a map. So when you clicked on this menu item here, it reports that this thing here needs to be done. Yeah. The problem with that menu system is the same basic issue. Is it's written to do one thing. It just does that one thing. If you want to have menus attached to different windows, you can't do that. So my goal here, at the moment, you can't do that with this one here either. But if we disconnected, if we didn't use a global array, we used an array handle, then we could have menus attached to anything. And as long as it's getting its parent position from this top left-hand coordinate up here, then it would work the same way. Same hovering features would work, etc. Oh, no, I know it's terrifying. No, it's another crusade we're sort of on. But I want to use this with the Blitz to PlayBASIC converter. So for that, I pretty much need a basic window, a menu that works, and that's probably about the size of it, really. Anyway, I'll leave it there for today. Please go and look at the code if you have any ideas, and don't be bashful. Don't be bashful at all. So we need a bunch of this stuff, a bunch of toing and froing about how this could be done, how it could be done better. We've got some limitations that are a byproduct of call function that we got to work around. We can't return values from those functions, so we're going to have to pass things into them. I'll give you an example. I think I've set one up at the top here. Yeah, so I've got a type for returning a particular type of data back to the user, and I don't know. I don't think this is called actually. I'm sorry, it is actually. Yeah, that's right. When we click on the load dialog, which is just a standard Windows dialog, so we could, even that could be just a custom dialog that we have built in, and then you could swap and change if you wanted to, as long as it has the same hooks, the same create, etc. Create, destroy, render, update. You're golden, and you won't get. Well, you only get compile errors if your function names collide with other function names that are currently in memory. So you couldn't have two menus that were called menu be in memory at once. You have to have, if you call your menu, something else or dialogue or whatever you're going to call it, then that's fine. But anyway, this thing here, I've got, when this is called, it accepts a pointer to this return structure. So in here, what it'll do is rather than return the string that was selected, it will initialize a return type in here, and then if a string was returned, it will set the return string. So it'll set the data type here to some value, I don't know, let's say 1 is integer, 2 1 is integer, 2 is float, 3 is string, and anything else is something that's unknown. So if we call the function and we get a return type of whatever, then we're golden. But that's one way of overcoming the need to return values. It's not pretty, but it can be done. All right, that's very confusing. Sorry about that. Hopefully we can press on with this, and hopefully you can see the merit in doing this. It's a different way of writing your application. You don't have this kind of, you're not part of the central loop anymore. You're just providing these worker functions that do stuff, and it doesn't mean you're going to work within the framework that's been provided. And I know how people hate doing that, but hopefully it'll work okay. I mean, if we have things like clicking to front and dragging and resizing a layer, that's going to be pretty cool, and we can add gadgets to it at some other point. Basic buttons. They could be secondary layers. They could be attached to other layers. So if you destroy one layer, you could tell it to its own destroy or its own delete function could then tell it to draw any sibling layers for you. And it's not that, I mean, it's complicated, but it's not that complicated. This is the crazy thing, If you delete something, it just needs to go back through and go, okay, the parent here was deleted. Are there any other objects or any other layers that are orphaned now because the parent's been deleted? Go through and do it. That's how Flex works as well, by the way. Anyway, it's enough of me blathering on. Sorry about the confusing state that this is in. Hopefully someone gets this. If you've got some ideas, and chuck them in the thread on the forum, and we'll see how we go with it. If not, I'll use it myself, and that'll be the end of that then. But ideally, we do need something that can handle the simplest GUI elements, and hopefully in a graphical or way, so we can, if we can get to that point where we can build tools out of it, I can build all the tools out of it. They can all have the same look, the same feel, and be consistent. At the moment, they don't. You've got old tools like the mapping tools that use different GUI interfaces. I think that one uses like 3 different interfaces in one. And one of the most awkward things about the mapping tool was that you've got issues with detecting whether the mouse clicks on certain things. There's focus issues all over the place. It shifts focus and stuff. It's really, really frustrating. Hopefully if we have one system doing this thing rather than trying to get 3 systems to work together in harmony, that should be better. I don't know. Probably crazy, but it's not the first time I've been crazy. Alright, thanks for that. I'll see you next time. Bye.